Greetings, friends. What is up? And welcome to episode 137 of Into the Necrosphere. I finally made it happen. After a good 18 months worth of back and forth, I have got Adam Agius of Alchemist, in my opinion, one of the most underrated and criminally overlooked bands on the face of the earth, on the hot seat at Mean Street Studios, also known as Zoom. And we discussed everything from the early days of the band all the way through to them getting signed by Relapse Records and the events that led to them disbanding in 2010. He also answered the question as to whether or not the band will ever get back together again. A very heartfelt, very sincere, thoroughly enjoyable conversation, which, frankly, exceeded all of my expectations. And if you're a fan of Alchemist, or frankly speaking, even if you don't know who they are, it is a tremendous chat that I am very excited to share with you. It's going to be coming your way shortly. First, though, Khold, who I have featured on the podcast a couple of times previously, are about to release a new single. They were very kind to, they very kindly shared it with me in advance so that I can pass on the love to you. So this is their forthcoming track, due for release, I believe, on July the 23rd. It's called Strive. Strive is the name of the track, the band Cult Burial, and I believe that song is due for release on July the 23rd. I will post the link to the Cult Burial Bandcamp in the description of the podcast. Make sure that you head over there and show them some love, and if you do buy yourself anything, make sure you let them know that it was old Jackson at Into the Necrosphere that sent you, and also tell them that it's about time that they appear on the podcast. It'd be great to have them on. I do think that they are, in my view, one of the brightest prospects in all of the UK black metal, blackened death metal scene. And I am stunned, frankly, that no one's picked them up yet. Also, kudos to whoever did that album cover, or that single cover, I should say, because like all of their artwork, it is absolutely second to none. If you are new to the podcast, make sure that you elbow drop the subscribe button on your podcasting platform of choice, be that YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon, Apple, so that you don't miss an episode, which I post every Tuesday. And to date, I have only missed two. One was when I had COVID, and one, I think, was when I was traveling in the US back in 2019. But beside my break that I take over Christmas, I have been pretty diligent. And so... if nothing else, if you like your podcasts consistently released, this is the one. This is the show for you. Also, remember to follow the show on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and I post various things on there about what's happening on the podcast. Share a few bits about music I'm listening to at the time. Speaking of music I'm listening to, I will be talking about the new Khold record after my conversation with Adam, and I will also be doing my usual news, rants, and react segment. This week, I am talking about, or giving my first impressions of new tracks by Panzerfaust, Gaerea, Grima. There's a load of bands. Some great stuff, some not so great stuff, and of course, no punches were pulled whatsoever. When you are done with the 3-hour marathon of grimness that you're about to embark on this show, then make sure that you check out my fellow horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse, Mike Hill and Everything Went Black. Necromaniacs, also featuring Mike Hill as well as Mike Scondato. And then the Horrible 666 podcast with Brandon Legion. I'll actually be appearing on that in the next couple of months. And then, of course, Iblis Manifestations with my brother Cheyenne of Trivax. He is actually a guest on this podcast next week. And if you like yourself spicy conversation, that one was all kinds of spicy. And actually, we got into some really deep personal stuff as well, as we did when I was on his show a couple of weeks ago. But that's a very good one. That's coming your way next week. Friends, thank you so much for checking out this podcast. I hope you guys enjoy the next the next 2.5 hours, I should say. And we start off with a conversation that has been 18 months in the making. This is Adam Agius of Alchemist. All right, we're rolling. Now, I will say right at the outset of the conversation, as I was preparing for this interview yesterday, I thought to myself, let me just normally I don't do a huge amount of prep. I'll only ever invite people on whose music I like and who I'm already interested in. I thought to myself, let me just look up interviews with Adam of Alchemist. One of the first interviews that popped up was one that apparently I did back in 2003. And I think it was an email interview when I had just started writing for a webzine called Chronicles of Chaos.
Oh, right. Yep.
And I was like, Jesus Christ, we've actually spoken technically, not directly. But yeah, man, how have you been doing?
Yeah, well, fine, mate. I hit 50 last year. Still playing in bands, so pretty good actually.
And for the folks that don't know, that would maybe followed you throughout Alchemist, and then kind of didn't know what you were up to thereafter. What bands are you playing in right now?
Well, pretty much immediately after Alchemist split in 2010, I started a band called the Levitation Hex. Very much in the a lot of similarities to Alchemist. Obviously, not the same, but
yeah.
It's quite impossible to achieve without the same four guys. We signed a deal with High Roller Records in Germany. We put out our debut album in 2012 and toured Europe, did about 10 dates. We put out another album in 2015 called Cohesion on the same label. Two of the members are in Alarum. They're a technical progressive band from Melbourne.
Mm.
And there was two of us here in Canberra. It made it notoriously difficult to get on top of things as a band, not being able to be in the same room together like every week. And then COVID hit, and we haven't done much, but I've been in a retro sort of proto metal boogie band called Pilots of Baalbek since 2017. We're working on our second album now. We'll probably record it next year, doing a handful of gigs this year. And we released our album and then we went into lockdown like so many bands. And so we managed to do a few live to airs and a few odd gigs here and there when things opened up and then closed back down. But now we're hitting it. And I started that band out of one day. I was sitting around going, well, why did I get into extreme music? Why did I get into music at all? And I examined that part of my life and discovered, well, actually I really love the Sweet and I really love Kiss and the Stooges and you name it. I'm going to do something to tip my hat at those bands that got me interested in the first place, and then eventually led to forming Alchemist. So that's where I'm at now. Not too extreme at the moment. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say I did really like the Levitation Hex, and I particularly enjoyed Cohesion. I thought it was a great record.
Really? Okay.
And it really felt to me like a spiritual successor to Alchemist. Especially tracks like Energy Refund. And songs like that.
Okay. Scott Young, he will be very happy to hear you say that. That was his favorite. Yeah.
It's superb. But kind of post, the lockdowns being lifted and hopefully the worst of the pandemic in the rear view. Has there been any talk of doing anything more with Levitation Hex?
Well, look, we were down together 2 weeks ago. Ben and I drove down to Melbourne. I spent the night at Palf's house and Youngie was there and we did have a bit of a jam, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, look, anything with those guys is fun. We're really good mates. So look, I'm not a never say never sort of guy, but they're just about that, they're just about to launch into doing shows for Alarum's latest album. So it's not going to be anytime soon. Being in two different cities, 700 kilometers apart, is very difficult. You've got to take the opportunities when they come up, and now that's not one of those opportunities for us. But look, something will happen.
Yeah. So as my preamble, and I did mention some of this on when we were off air, I have always felt that Alchemist never got the recognition that it deserved, and it definitely never got the send off that it deserved. So part of the reason that I had scoured the four corners of the globe to track you down is really to kind of be able to have that conversation and, treat it as a bit of a retrospective over the band, and then also maybe talk about, some of your memories and maybe some of the, some of the influences and things that kind of created what to me was just a superbly unique sound. And I think one thing to add, my first kind of live, real experience of Alchemist was seeing you guys live. I think the date was October 5th, 2004 at the London Garage. Could be 2004, could be 2003.
No, you're spot on.
I remember turning to the guy who was with me. You were playing what I later on obviously discovered was Chinese Whispers. And I said to the dude, this band sounds like, it's one of those things to see a band that but when you don't see a band, when you see a band that you don't know and they completely blow you away, that's something truly special. And I turned to my friend and I said, this band sounds like they should be filling out stadiums. Like, this is not a band that is what they're doing here. I mean, I love it, but it is way too big for a venue as tiny as the Garage. And so I've kind of been carrying the torch for you guys ever since. I've spoken about you on the podcast an awful lot. But do you still remember that show?
I absolutely do remember that show. I remember finishing that show and being forced out onto the street into the back of the venue instantly, sweating and cold. But I do. I mean, I remember I remember quite a bit of that tour being our first European tour. And I definitely remember that show. And we were just stoked there was a crowd because we were supporting Cult of Luna. To us, were a devastating live band. Like, you know, starts with a pin drop and then ends with a nuclear explosion. That was their set, you know. Really amazing. Yeah, I do remember it. And look, I've got a vivid memory from the stage looking at it. It was a pretty dark venue. Yeah, look, I do. And they were great times. I mean, we were just so stoked to be doing it, to tell you the truth. It took us so long to get there that, you know, we really wish that we were able to hit it there in 97 or 95, 97, you know, around that area, the Lunasphere's Spiritech era. It would have been ideal. Because we're all getting on by that stage. And, you know, by the time we finished touring, we were all pushing 40 and people were having kids and, you know, it became more and more difficult. But while we were on it, we truly were a band. We really shared a vision. And we shared, you know, common musicality. You know, we'd be in a room together. We used to rehearse twice a week for almost 20 years. And then when Rod moved to Brisbane, it was like he didn't move. We could get together once a month or once every 2 months and still be right on it because we had that connection, you know. Like I just said with the Levitation Hex, that's a lot more difficult with newer people to achieve that.
Yeah. Right. That is one thing that's I remember striking me about that show was not only, you know, the first thing that hit me was just the wall of sound that just kind of, you know, came at you off the stage. Yeah. But I mean, it was also it wasn't just the loudness, it was kind of the, you know, how densely layered everything was. You know, you had this just walloping groove and then all of the stuff that you guys throw on top. But the other thing that really struck me is I remember seeing you guys and just thinking how polished you were. And it's interesting what you say now about, you know, how tight the band were at the time. It blew my mind just sort of how connected everybody seemed on stage, you know, and how everyone on stage, you know, genuinely seemed to feel the music. You know, you guys weren't Dillinger Escape Plan as far as, you know, on stage physicality was concerned, but there was a real energy coming off the stage, which again to me was kind of like, I'm watching this, I'm like, how the fuck is this band not bigger?
Well, we used to think that too, you know, but we really believed that we could, you know, we really believed in the band. And that connection was very, very deep. You know, they're my brothers, man. You know, I love them. We went through the war together is the way I like to, you know, being an underground band for 25, 27 years or whatever, it's hard work, man, you know, balancing day jobs and families and everything. We could fight like brothers do, but when we're on stage, we'd always have that connection. There was never a grudge, you know, and you could be straight back into it off stage and fighting, but on stage was, no, mate, we were in a different place and we knew the importance of it. And we knew the importance of conveying that to an audience. So they feel comfortable because they want to feel like they're part of what you're doing. I mean, like every other music, you know, and you feed off that. It's a cliche and it's so true though, but we really thought the stage presence was you know, a very important thing, but we didn't really have to try it. We had that connection, you know.
So interesting you talk about, you know, that belief in the band, because if you go back to the early days of the band, you know, particularly the first record, you guys were doing some really out there music at a time where the metal scene was way more conservative than it is now, and far less accepting of, you know, any form of experimentation. And I mean, I think anybody who's a fan, even folks that are, you know, fans of Alchemist, I mean, they don't realize your first demo came out in 1987. I mean, that's like the back end of the thrash wave, beginnings of kind of early death metal. Talk to me a little bit about the early days of the band coming together and kind of what the Australian scene was like at the time.
Well, okay, it's not the definitive lineup, but the start of the band, like so, was the first demo was 87. We started playing about 85, 86. I think I was 14, maybe 15. And they were just with schoolmates, good fellas. We went to a local concert, 85, called Heavy Metal Holocaust at the YMCA, and the bands playing were Transylvania, who were a couple of older blokes at school, Crystal Blade, Under Oath, and Armored Angel. And we'd been, to see bigger bands with our parents and stuff. I've seen Maiden, I'd seen Purple, but this was something completely different and that you immediately identified with, and it was the first sort of underground local gig. Right? So I met other non-school members of the bands at that show, and we got chatting, and Alchemist formed from that show. All right.
Mm.
We'd approach, say, the older guys in Transylvania and Armored Angel. And by the way, Under Oath and Armored Angel sort of became one final lineup later. Joel Green was in Under Oath, who's in Witch Skull now, who are probably the biggest metal band in Australia at the moment. Really kicking. So
I was about to say, Under Oath they're still going, are they not?
No, they're not. No, there's probably another.
I'm thinking of the American Under Oath.
Yeah. Anyhow, so he went on. Joel from Under Oath went on to join Armored Angel in their definitive lineup. Anyhow, but the early lineup of them, we approached them and said, "Look, we're a young band, and we want to do gigs and all this sort of stuff." And so they came to our rehearsal, and we were just pitiful. But instead of bagging us out and laughing, they just gave us pointers. And 2 weeks later, they said, "Do you want to support us on our next Youth Cafe show?" And it all went from there. And we were 14, 15 years old. We did that show with them. And then from then on, we'd book the Youth Cafe. We'd hire the PA in because none of the venues had anything at that stage. We'd hire the PA in. We'd take the risk. We'd charge $3 or $4 to get in. We'd cover the PA costs, and little entrepreneurs. We didn't think of anything like that. But it was like, when I think back to it, the amount of organisation that we had to put a show on, it taught us everything we needed to do for the rest of our career. And you had. I
was about to say at the age of like 14 or 15, which is wild.
Yeah. So we from there kept doing it. So that 87 demo, I think that lineup probably split up that year, and then there was another lineup in 88, which we did a couple of live to air radio things with, but no shows. Then Rod Holder approached me in 1989. I was in year 12, high school. We call it college in Australia. It's not, it's high school.
Yeah.
And said, "Look, you got a name, around town, Alchemist, everyone knows the name, you play these Youth Cafe shows, and I really want to be in it, do you want to start another lineup?" And he was insistent that it was still going to be called Alchemist. Like, no, it's got to be Alchemist. And so we went from there. We had a fellow named James Priest on bass and Andy Meredith on guitar. I'm both in contact with those guys still. James is still playing. We did the 1990 demo. Then James was out and Andy was out. Oh no, James was out. Andy Meredith was still in. John Bray joined the band, who was with us forever after that. And we put out the 91 demo, which if you haven't heard it, it's the best thing of that era. It's better than a 90 demo. It's better than Jar of Kingdom. Right? It's really polished, lovely sounding demo. And then we did some, demos to do Jar of Kingdom and signed to Lethal Records in Austria, and, had all the grand delusions of being rock stars as soon as we put the album out, and, world tours and all that sort of stuff, and started taking German lessons because we were sure we were going to be shipped over to Germany. Yeah. This is no shit. We started taking German lessons. Right. And yeah, okay. We got this little budget, and it was only enough to record at night for the first album, Jar Kingdom, in 93. I think it was actually 92 we recorded it, but we were doing 1 a.m. till 6 a.m. sort of slots, and I lost my voice really, really quickly.
I was just about to say, like, one of the things listening back to Jar of Kingdom is you can hear on the recording like how hard you were pushing your voice. I mean, it was like it was kind of like a more shouty Patrick Mamelli, from Pestilence, but it was because the thing is, I want to talk about your voice a bit more later on as well, because that was something that had become such a distinct feature of Alchemist as the albums progressed. But on that first record, like, I almost feel sorry for you hearing that, because it's like, Jesus Christ, he is like just ripping on those vocal cords right now.
Oh, that's absolutely what I was doing. And here's what we did. I mean, look, at the time, I really wish that I kept the same vocal style as the 91 demo, because I ended up sort of going back to that sort of style, which was more of, a death thrash approach rather than a guttural death metal approach. But I was a huge Chris Ryford fan and Autopsy fan at the time Jar of Kingdom was going on. And I was trying to be very guttural, but I had completely blown my voice. So what I did to try and get some sort of depth to it is I listened to all the tapes back quick and did my vocals with the tape going fast. And so that when it was slowed down, there was a bit of guts to it, okay? But you're totally right. All I can hear when I listen to it, and I never do, but when it's on the radio or something, and it's like, oh yeah, it was desperate. That you're hearing exactly what it was like. I was just tearing my hair out, and I'll never forget, looking through the glass to the boys behind the desk, my bandmates who are trying so hard not to have disappointed looks on their faces. That's my memory of it. And they were the best guys. So it was sort of like, yeah. But the funny thing is, I would get criticized later in my career because I didn't sound like that anymore. It's like, oh really?
But that's always the way. There's always going to be a load of people that go, oh, you don't sound like the first album anymore, so you shit.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was it. And it was, and it was a highly ambitious record, and we really, really went, we really hadn't found our sound yet, but what we were after is Autopsy meets Piper at the Gates of Dawn, okay, and it is quite much like that in the fact that there'll be a really, really heavy passage, and then it'll just flip, and it'll flip to something that is incoherent. We didn't know how to write songs, so it was like this idea now, and it'd be full 1967 psychedelia, and we were there, and the main reason we want to do that is because Sydney and Melbourne had both excellent thrash metal scenes, and death metal had exploded, and we were like, well, all these towns have got a million death bands and a million thrash bands, and we want to stand out somehow. So why don't we combine another one of our loves, which was psychedelia? We had a red hot crack at it.
But the thing is, I was going to say it was really gutsy because again, listening to Jar of Kingdom, which I've done again recently, there's so much experimentation and so much avant-garde stuff plowed into that for a young band in a, like I said, a scene that wasn't hugely accepting of experimentation at that time. Like if you weren't making, Deicide clone music, you were weak. Like I was amazed listening to that again, thinking to myself, like, guys in their early 20s or, late teens having the balls to actually do this at that time is mind blowing.
Yeah. Well, look, we just really didn't care,
Yeah.
We were building a strong following in Canberra, and it's funny. I'll just say that, overall the extreme scene was not accepting of anything that weird, but Canberra was. Okay, so Canberra adopted it and became the 90s metal mecca. It has no longer got that status. It still has a very healthy scene, but in the 90s and the noughties, it was untouchable. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you pull bigger crowds in Canberra than you would in Sydney and Melbourne, and everyone would, for quite a long time. And so it was the Canberra audience's willingness to accept it, and not just accept it, but embrace it, that just, well, I guess it spoiled us a little bit. We sort of was only a few years into the starting the band, and we had a really dedicated following at home, and that you can really sort of bounce off, and be a bit cocky and just do stuff. And most of it was because we didn't care, and we were, I guess, listen to the history of metal, the big bands have a sound, they have a thing they do. So let's find something, let's try and find something. We might get a bit embarrassed along the way, but we just went for it,
But that, again, that's also admirable, because there was, it was at a time when, and I think it still happens to this day, a lot of bands want to sound like other bands. They don't necessarily, strive after developing and defining and honing their own sound. And I mean, you can hear, even though Jar of Kingdom is very different to, stuff that you would put out later, you can hear the building blocks of what was going to become the band are present there already. And certainly a willingness to color outside the lines was ever present.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's a hard listen, Jar of Kingdom. Especially for me, it's a hard listen. Sometimes if I listen to it, I really don't understand how I even came up with some of the stuff we did. So I have no concept here of what I was doing. It's that mad. Look, basically, it was such a broad palette that we had somewhere to go from there. No worries. We could start cutting it down to somewhere we were more comfortable, and I think we didn't really do that until Spiritech. But Lunasphere, I think, is probably the most requested album for me. When people ask, what's my favorite, Lunasphere or Spiritech? For me, it's Spiritech. But a lot of the older school fans, Lunasphere is the album. You can hear that building block in those three albums. So you can, it's quite, I think.
Outside of Canberra, like, when you weren't in front of your hometown crowd, what was the response like to the band around that time?
Oh, around Jar of Kingdom time. Oh, hilarious walkouts. And, we had almost given up on Sydney. It used to be a 5.5 hour drive back then with the crappy roads. And we'd pile in 2 vans and get up there and open up for, like, you got no hope opening up for Sadistic Execution playing what we were doing, And, and great guys, totally mad and amazing. But, that's the sort of thing we were stuck in. We couldn't find anywhere, and people were like, what are you guys doing? Like, I like your heavy bits, but what are you? Are you metalheads? Oh, well, I don't know. So we got that a lot, and we bounced around doing whatever gigs we could, trying to build an audience. And then once we got to support Mass Appeal, who were a big 80s hardcore, sort of avant-garde hardcore. They had their own sound, but, bands like Mortal Sin and Slaughter Lord would play with Mass Appeal, and there was that crossover, like there was in the thrash metal era.
Yeah.
Brett from Mass Appeal had heard the 90 demo and just loved it, and I'm bringing you boys up, and that was where it all changed for Sydney. All right. It was like from that moment on, we could go to Sydney and fill a room.
Yeah.
All the way through our career. And Melbourne was probably the next year after that. I think we played a few shows with Abramelin and Blood Duster. It would have been a very early Blood Duster. Maybe it was could have been an old thrash band called Mass Confusion. There might have been a Hobbs Angel of Death. Sort of support. The old guard sort of letting us do shows, and things started to take off there, but it was a little later. Brisbane, on the other hand, Gold Coast, we toured in 93 with Toe to Toe, and I can't believe I remember this stuff. Toe to Toe and Dream Killers, and Dream Killers were pulling 1,000 heads, and we'd never seen that for a local band, and they put us on as main support, and so we had this great exposure from our first day up there, and it was great ever since. And
yeah.
So it did take a bit of time to build, but once it did, we were pretty untouchable. We could go anywhere, we could name our price, we could, do what you do, and when you're filling seats,
this is awesome. this kind of being still in the this is the early days of the internet. I don't think people that weren't around in that time sometimes realize how different the scene was, how different it was when it came to you discovering music, but also how different touring worked. I was going to ask out of curiosity, around that time, how many international bands, in the at the extremer end of the metal scene were coming out to Australia at the time?
It'd be lucky to be one a year.
Yeah.
Now things really changed around 2006, 2007. The floodgates were opened.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why we changed the other things we were doing, putting on shows and stuff, because you could no longer compete on a local scale. You had to compete on an international scale. And there became like the grass is greener on the other side sort of crap that happens in every country, where punters think that stuff from overseas is better. Okay. It's just, that happens in every single country I've been to. All right. That's not an Australian thing, although, we're all convicts behind bars going, look, let us out. We're good, we're good. Yeah. There's that sort of mentality. It was when we were kids anyhow. So it was, we're going to show them. But hardly anything. I mean, and we were lucky. I mean, we had Pungent Stench come out in 93, just as we released Jar of Kingdom, and they were friends with Michael Pierce from Lethal Records in Austria, who we were signed to. And they just took us under their wing, and we were all palsy, and, we went out to dinner, and then we went back to my mate's house and played pool till 3 a.m. after the show. So we got, a Pungent Stench report, and we were massive Bean Court Buttering fans, like just, out of the park. They were, because they were so comical as well,
Yeah.
And then, I mean, look, there was Fear Factory. We did them. I think we did them twice on 2 tours, actually. But yeah, it didn't really get to the spot where it is now, where there's one on every week.
Yeah.
It was that different because it was notoriously expensive to bring bands out here. And our carnet and customs laws were notoriously expensive for the promoter and the musician. They've changed a lot now. Right? But they would just basically take an arm and a leg off the touring band, and there was all these sorts of laws that they must put on an Australian band support, and that's slowed a lot of the tours down because the US bands usually wanted to bring their own support. And I actually thought that was a great way to expose Australian music. But yeah, look, it was very different. And so you would all just you'd have every promoter's PO box or address or phone number. And when you heard that those bands were coming out, it was a bombardment,
Yeah.
I mean, nothing compared to what they probably get today, where everyone's got free access to them, but there would have been phone calls and letters and free gifts and just trying to get on, So we did a hell of a lot of them. We did a hell of a lot, but especially towards the end, we did a lot, because we were playing some of those festivals in Australia, like Big Day Out, which was, headlined by Rage Against the Machine or whatever the year we did it. And, so we were mingling like that and meeting those promoters, and we got chucked a lot of bones, I think. They were always super fun.
One thing that I've spoken to a couple of people about is the sound of that kind of quintessential Australian sound that a lot of Australian metal bands have, and I there is a so I say it from the perspective of somebody. I've lived in the UK for 20 years. I came from South Africa and the South African scene, which, well, I mean, no disrespect to my countrymen, is trash for the most part, but Australia is very different. Like, Australia's scene has evolved into something right now where if a band's from Australia, I'm almost instantly interested in hearing what it sounds like, because, over the years, the quality that has come out of Australia has been so fantastic. And part of the reason why I love it so much, for some reason, the best way I can describe it is, if there is a straight axis creatively, Australian bands always just kind of seem to lean a little off kilter, whether it's, a little off kilter to the left, maybe it's a bit more avant-garde, maybe they deploy their extreme influences in a different way, but there's always been something that's been extremely unique about the way that Australian bands sound. Hearing you talk about a similar kind of isolation, I think, to what we experienced in South Africa, do you think that it was that kind of, being sort of left to your own devices and letting, having to evolve your own scene, that contributed to the way that that Australian kind of extreme music has developed and evolved and kind of created its own identity over the years?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. This is the way it was, in the early 80s, you had local bands and that's it. And even getting a band from Sydney or a band from Melbourne coming through was a big thing. So if there was a local star, so either Mortal Sin or Addictive or Hobbs Angel of Death, or Slaughter Lord, or not that they ever played here, but there'd be 600 kids.
Yeah.
The average show these days is 100. So there'd be 600 kids, and you worship these people, and in a good way. And you were extremely protective and proud of it, because the idea was, we're as good as them. These guys are as good as them, and look, that goes way, way back in Australian musical history, because if you go back to punk, two of the biggest influences of punk sounding music were the Radio Birdmen and the Saints. Okay. Now, lots of early punk bands will go, yeah, well, those guys were really pushing the boundaries there. We've always been doing a similar thing, but we had, especially way back in the day, 50 years ago, you had no access to it. You had 3 record shops in Australia that would stock a Metallica album. You know what I mean? So you get tape trading and all this sort of stuff, and we knew what was going on and we were listening to what's going on, but you're also really heavily influenced by your local scene, because that's all you have. And so you're left to your own devices to evolve a little bit more naturally. I cannot speak for the current scene because I'm a geriatric, all right? And I really don't understand a lot of it. When I go to extreme gigs these days, things seem a lot more technical to me, really, but there's still a lot of people doing sort of old school things, which I really like. But I can't really comment on what the sound is like now, because I'm not deeply involved enough, But for me, definitely, 100%, it was the isolation and the natural evolution. And also, we were definitely getting influence from bands from overseas, but you had no perspective of scene over there. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't know there was a thrash metal scene when we were little headbangers. We just knew there was Metallica and Exodus and all these bands that we could get from Impact Records, and all chip in to buy the record together, because you couldn't do it, and then it'd get passed around. But yeah, look, I don't regret that isolation at all. In fact, it really nurtured us, and I think I've mentioned before that it also spoiled us, because we were used to, by Australia, and we're pulling 1,000 people to shows, and you get used to being a bit of a star, and then in 2004 you go to Europe and you're like, oh right, we're doing this sort of thing again, are we? Like building shit, and your expectations were wildly off, you know. Yeah, and then there'd be the odd show that you're going, oh right, okay, so you know this is more of what we're used to, but the rest of it was hard slog in little venues and doing that stuff, which is highly enjoyable as well. But yeah, we certainly were, after a couple of shows in, going, oh, we've been a little bit spoiled, haven't we? Like, you know, we've sort of come from somewhere where everyone knows us and they're coming to see us to a band's trying to break ground again, you know. And
Well, no, but wouldn't you say part of that was the fact that you guys got signed by Relapse at really what, in my opinion, was the golden age for Relapse Records? You know, you think about the bands that they were putting out at around about the same time.
Agreed.
Mastodon, High on Fire, Burnt by the Sun. I think they were putting out Dillinger Escape Plan as well around the same time. So, you know, you're talking like elite of the elite bands. And I mean, that's how you guys first popped on my radar, because there was a point in time where anything Relapse Records put out was almost, you know, if you were to, you know, roll the dice on it, it would almost always be good. So I guess like you would almost have had that degree of expectation that, you know, you'd be welcomed, you know, in a place like Europe with open arms. And as you say, it was slightly expectation versus reality was slightly different.
Yeah, look, and it wasn't that bad either, because, you know, we knew how to win over a crowd. We knew if they could we could hold their attention for one song, that they would stay the whole set. We knew that. And, you know, that whole Relapse era for us was fantastic, and a few albums too late, I feel, but they were incredibly supportive, really, really good for us. And they really, really struggled to sell us. They really struggled. I mean, they would be very upfront with it. We were a hard thing to market. I mean, look, by the end of our career, 2008, our last European tour, we were headlining shows in Europe, you know, and like prog power. And I don't understand the prog tag as far as Alchemist is concerned, because we didn't poo-poo it though. We just went, okay, they want to call us prog, fine. Okay, call us whatever you like. Just come to the front. Like, you know, we don't care what we're tagged at. We were always trying to be psychedelic, and we did it good and we did it bad and we did it in between. But we never used the word progressive because it wasn't what we were listening to, you know. And you know, anything that had the prog tag that we were listening to would have been from the 70s, like Hawkwind, you know. And they're space rock anyhow, the only space rock band, I think. But anyhow, you know, it sort of shocked us. It sort of shocked us. But it goes to show just how far off we were. I mean, we had no idea really how to even, I guess, market ourselves. I mean, you know, we're calling ourselves, you know, psychedelic metal. By the end of it, we actually took the prog tag and said, well, if that's what they want to call us, let's call it aggressive progressive, you know. But we didn't even really know how to class ourselves, and would often feel a little bit out of place towards the end, you know. What are we? And I know that Relapse really struggled with it too before that. Displeased Records really struggled with it. Just about, it's the story of our career. And we've got a lot of people into us, and we could pull a crowd, and as far as really making an impact with album sales, it was a really difficult thing to achieve. And I mean, look, I'm glad people still talk about us, you know. It really surprises me. But one thing I do remember, and when we were on, we were such a hot band and impossible to follow. Like, it was so hard for people to come on after us. I'll never forget that. It was, you know, just an excellent time. And that era, that Relapse era, was really, really exciting for us. But, you know, we were getting on too. We were getting lolled in the tooth, and shit was happening with band members, with kids coming, and, you know, it's just like, why is it happening now? Why couldn't it be in 97, you know, or not 2004, you know?
It's funny you say that, because as I'm sitting listening to you talk, and again, having thought about this many times over the years, like I do almost feel like you guys were a band just slightly out of time, like out of step with the time. Had you come around a decade later, when you I think have a far more accepting, maybe even a greater appetite for bands that do something different and do something unique, I think you guys could have been absolutely massive. And I 100%, I'm not surprised people are still talking about it. I suspect there will be a groundswell of people that continue to discover this band. You guys are going to be like, those one of those movies that comes out, doesn't do particularly well at the box office, and then 10 years later they're like, Jesus, why is it #1 streaming movie on Netflix? And everyone's trying to buy the Blu-ray, or people, there's fan expos being held about it. I really do feel like you've got, there's always going to be this love, and I feel like the love for this band's going to keep growing.
Well, look, I hope so. I mean, look, I love it. I would drive the rest of the band absolutely nuts with how obsessed with it I was. Like, and it wasn't a healthy obsession at times, and they were very, very patient and forgiving, at times with me. But still, when I look back, I'm so super proud of it. Like, I love it, and I lived it, and we all did. And I said this earlier in an interview. It's just that we had this brotherhood and common musicality, and knew what we were doing, and all really, really wanted to achieve it. So you had 4 drivers, it was never one person. It was all of us, at the beginning, before John and Roy and Rod joined by end of 91, it was pretty much me and Rod driving it. When the definitive lineup happened, it was everyone's captain. And there was no argument. You couldn't pull anyone out of the equation because they were too important. Every single person, and we just weren't interchangeable. We were so close that it was once there was a issue with Rod moving to Brisbane, and I think he left after the 2007 European tour for a couple of weeks. Said I'm out, and we toyed with the idea of replacing him and got some guys interested in it. It wasn't right. You just can't take anyone out of the equation. It doesn't work with this band. It's us. So, if we were ever to do anything again, everyone would have to feel that same way, for it to work. And I've had discussions with Roy recently, would you do it again? I mean, just because there's so much talk about it, And he's like, yeah, I would. And then we discussed a few things. For me personally, I have an issue. And I have an issue with my performance. Okay, it's not an issue with anyone else in the band, but you mentioned Chinese Whispers. You saw us at the garage. I bet you those screams in the chorus took your head off, right?
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah, right. So they were screamed. It's not a little croaky microphone trick. I'm screaming them. And even back then in my youth, it was a real mental thing. I had to believe it to be able to do it. Sounds a bit nerdy, but it's the truth. Towards the last few shows I've done with Levitation, where I let a couple of those screams rip, it has been notoriously difficult to get anything that doesn't sound like a raped cat, because I'm 50, mate. I'm not that 20-year-old guy, mate. My voice, my whole physicality has changed. I'm extremely fit, but it's just something that was it's something I could do, and I'm not quite 100% sure if I can do that anymore. And I know there's parts in the songs where kids in the crowd are looking at me to do that scream. Like, I witnessed it over 25 years. It's like they know it's coming. They're looking at the dwarf at the front, and he's going to let it rip like all demons from hell. And it was incredibly satisfying when it worked, and I was so super proud of it. So for me, I don't want to offer up something that's not that.
That's half baked. Yeah. I get
I
where you're
wouldn't be
coming
half
from.
baked. I'd be giving it 110%, but it'd sound like 20% because the body just can't. And, I know that would have annoyed him because, Alchemist is not all about my voice. It's all about everyone. All right. But, it's Jesus. Can I do it? I mean, I'd really have to believe that I could. And I'd have to have the other three guys in the band believing I could too, because I really needed them to believe in me a lot of the time. In the studio to achieve things like that, I need them to egg me on. It seems to be all the flavour here in Australia for 90s bands to reform and, do stuff. And look, a couple of them I've played shows with Levitation Hex with, one being Misery from Brisbane, and they are so bloody good now. Like, I was blown away by them. Bramelin's another one. They reformed.
Yeah.
Unbelievable performance. So if I was going to do it, we'd have to be that good. Like I wouldn't get on stage. It's not, I wouldn't insult my own memory, and especially insult the punters if they wanted to. They're going in there. They know what they want to hear. I want to be assured that I can deliver it,
You mentioned the scream too, and that had become such a trademark of your voice. Like, I couldn't imagine a song like Austral Spectrum, for example, without that scream that you sort of have early on in the song. It's such it almost like becomes an additional hook in the song because of where you place it.
Yeah, well, look, I'm just the guy screaming. The other guys, especially Rod, was very excellent with vocal ideas. I used to bounce a lot off his ideas, and it mightn't have been me who said, "Let's put it here." It could have been anyone in the band. But obviously, if I thought I could put it off, I thought I could pull it off, and that's why it's there. But yeah, look, it was, and it's just like a similar thing, say, to the start of Yoni Kunda with Roy's hypnotic harmonic minor guitar loop. All right, down, like that. I'd watch people's eyes, I'd be there, and he start that song, and it's like, okay, they're all lining up. That's what they're hearing. You can't do that song without that. You can't, that's one part of it. We've got a lot of songs like that where there's crucial elements, and the vocals was no exception. There's parts where, especially where I'm letting those banshee screams go, it's wow. I mean, I was concerned when we went to Europe. I mean, the most shows we'd ever done in Australia in a row, I think, was 10. And then we go to Europe, and I think we did 32. I was like, how's my voice going to hold out? Well, it held out just fine, as long as I shut up after the show. Talking to punters after the show.
Lay off the whiskey.
Yeah. Right. It'd be sensible, and I could do it. But, I was a younger man, and I saw Tom Araya. He just stopped doing his screams because his throat would no longer pull them off, and later in his career. And every now and then he'd try and sneak one in, and you could see the regret on his face. It's like, why did I even try that? Like he would have been so excited to do it, and then it's just, oh shit, okay, that's why I don't do it anymore,
That's the thing, man. Like age catches up to us all. Alan Averill of Primordial did a episode recently where he was talking about how people's voices change as they get older, and is it fair to throw the sort of criticism at somebody like John Bon Jovi that people have done? But as a fan, like not necessarily of John Bon Jovi, but like bands I grew up listening to. You watch James Hetfield, you watch Phil Anselmo, you watch Axl Rose. I mean, Axl Rose now, for a guy that had such a distinct and such a powerful voice, I mean, he's starting to sound like Herbert the Pervert of a Family Guy. And you almost, part of you kind of goes, if I could see them live now, would I want to? Because would I want to taint the memory that I have of the halcyon days of that band? And it's almost, I wouldn't say Metallica are quite there yet, but I've heard several recordings where James is not having a good night. But then I've also heard some where he sounds great. So
yeah, and I think he's very self-conscious about it, actually. I mean, that guy's open with the way he feels, that I really respect that. And I think it really bothers him, and I can understand that. But, man, I'm not the biggest band in the world. It must be like very daunting for him because he's playing to hundreds of thousands a day sometimes, and it's like, oh, I don't feel like I'm hitting it like I was, It's got to play on him. It's not easy. Then again, some old guys just seem to keep ripping it out. I watched a Rose Tattoo clip last night from this year, and Angry's so on it. The guy's 70 and he's just belting it out.
Well, you know who's absolutely fucking killing it? Because I've spoken about this on the podcast before, and after I recorded that episode, I was like, God damn it, I should have remembered that. Jazz Coleman of Killing Joke. I mean, the dude who reminds me most of you, actually, and we'll get into that in a second.
But that's great.
Oh my God! If you see them live now, I mean, I would argue he almost sounds better than he ever has, and I don't know where he gets it from because he's a fucking lunatic on stage. He's also an old guy, but like you talk about something that sort of stirs a subprimal emotion in you, when they do a song like Exorcism or something like that. I mean, it's otherworldly to experience that live.
Yeah, well, they're brilliant. I love them. And what got me into Killing Joke was people telling me that we sounded like them. And that ramped up even more with Levitation. It's like, oh, you guys just sound like Killing Joke. And I just went, oh, okay. So I just, I knew songs like 80s and, they're pop hits basically in the 80s. And went, oh, well, I'm going to listen to this. And just went, yeah, okay, I can see what people are saying. I can definitely hear it. And now they're one of my favorite bands. I listen to them quite a lot. They're absolutely bloody brilliant. By the way, Jazz Coleman engineered and produced Armored Angel's last album as the Green Brothers and Glenn Luck that never got released. Okay, never got released.
Oh, shit.
Did all this orchestration and everything. Apparently Lucy, who's Glenn Luck, is the bass player, apparently he held on to it, but it basically split the band up. I think, they were like looking to expand their sound or do something different, and it just caused division. But yeah, Matt and Joel Green, they rave about Jazz Coleman and how amazing an engineer and producer he is, and how much that guy knows. And his music's just outstanding. I mean, how do you even class it?
They just put out that new single. I think I can't remember if it's called Lords of Chaos, but I mean, it's fucking brilliant. It's like, how are you still putting music out that is so relevant at this age? I mean, you have to be blown away by that.
Oh yeah, look, it's inspirational to keep going. To keep doing music. I mean, the career they've had is incredible. And next time they're out here, I'm definitely catching them.
Yeah.
They were due to come out here, COVID, and it's like, no. But yeah, I'll be there. I can see why people say, oh, you influenced by them? But yeah, look, I'm really only influenced by them now and in the last 10 years. With Alchemist, I wasn't listening to them, or, totally see it.
I think for me, where that influence came in is mostly in your voice, and it's because you had mastered something that I absolutely love. I've always wished I could do, but whenever I have done vocals anywhere, it's just always been screaming or growling. But the one thing I've never been able to do, would have wanted to do, think is incredibly difficult, is that sort of pitch shout, like a pitched shout that you have. Especially I feel it kind of. Yeah, it's like screaming on a melody. With Organism, it really kind of comes to the fore, and then obviously with with the two subsequent records, there you had really got it down pat. How did that style evolve? Because this is outside of the days of vocal lessons and all sorts of stuff like that. I mean, that is just purely you just kind of finding your feet as a singer and finding your sound as a singer.
Well, that sound I can still pull. That main heavy, aggressive, but understandable vocal. I can still pull that off, right? Which I'm immensely happy about. But there was nothing intentional there. I guess, like I said earlier in the interview, if you listen to the 1991 demo, I was trying to do that, okay? And I really like the diction on that demo and on Organism and Australian and Tripsis. Like, you can understand the words I'm saying. So I guess it's a short shoulder death thrash approach, and I wanted to be aggressive. I wanted to be a little guttural, but I wanted you to understand the word and almost sing it. And there's some like I think it might be single-sided where I'm sort of half doing that and half singing. I really like that style. There's not a lot of range in my voice to be able to do it. But when I can hit it, I really enjoy that because it's aggressive and melodic at the same time. I cut down doing the full-on melodic stuff, I guess, in Tripsis. There's a fair bit less of it, and even less by, say, Cohesion Levitation Hex. I just there was just a lot of bands around at the time doing the bloody Cookie Monster and then the really nice, sweet melodic voice and then the Cookie Monster, and it's sort of like...
Which I despise, by the way.
I absolutely hate that. We did it, we did it. And I guess when we did it, Australian sort of era, there wasn't a lot of bands doing it. It was me going, well, I can sing and I'm going to, but as I got older, it's like, we're essentially a metal band, and my soft singing voice is very soft. It's very, very melodic, and it's too much of an extreme for me to be comfortable with. And also physically to do is very difficult. If you listen to really early Opeth, Mikhail can rip between the melodic and the death metal is crushingly death metal. Live Opeth these days, he's pulling back, or he can't achieve the real guttural death metal anymore. He can still sing like an angel, but doing that, mate, what's he going to do, mate? His voice is changing. He's getting older. He's doing 1,000 shows a year. Shit wears out. But I just sort of went, that's where you got to start deciding, I guess, and you're going to do one or the other. And I guess that's why they started doing stuff like Heritage and those albums, which I love too, beautiful records. It's a real difficult thing to achieve. And, it started to feel really cheesy to me, and hearing it from, doing the exact same thing I was doing, but another band doing it, and me cringe just going, oh, well, that makes me think twice now. Ooh.
Where you did it extremely well was a song, if you think about Tripsis, a song like Grasp at Air, where you kind of had the shout and then the clean singing that came over it. Was that your voice, the clean voice on there?
Yeah, that's all me.
Which sounded fantastic.
Yeah, I don't like the sound of that album. It's got nothing to do with the producer. It's got to do with myself and Roy's inadequate engineering skills, because we started doing it at home at that stage. And it was a very, very difficult time for the band, actually. Like, I can't believe we got that out. I mean, we were falling apart. We didn't know it, and no one would admit it. None of us would admit it, because we all loved it, and everyone had a different reason of why it was falling apart, and they're all completely valid. But that album, geez, I don't know, how do we even get it out? I mean, they were difficult times. It essentially was Roy and myself in my garage for 18 months without the others, and doing the others by correspondence. And you couldn't have told me that it wasn't working back then, because I had blinders on, and this was all I was going to do, and it was going to happen, and we were going to do it, and I was super determined, okay? And, so, I'm glad we went through. We did 2 European tours off that album.
It's a superb record, by the way. I absolutely love it.
Just hate the guitar sounds. Like, I can't even remember what we used, but it was the wrong choice. It was the wrong choice of recording equipment, definitely. And Richie, D.W. Norton, he did his best to mix it, you know, and he did a great job. He's not responsible for the guitar tones that I hate. It's not him.
Yeah.
But yeah, those vocals are all done in my garage. And I was really anal with it, and really, you know, I knew enough about engineering to make everything sit nice, and we tried. That's for
No,
sure.
well, like I said, I mean, you know, you're a big fan of me of that album.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the, you know, subsequent to that record coming out, going on those tours? What was kind of the tipping point to say it was time to call it a day on the band?
Well, I look, and by the way, you're the first person to hear any of this since the band broke up. I've not done an interview. And
I massively appreciate that. But
I think everyone knew, the journalists in Australia knew me well enough not to ask me, I think, because it was extremely painful. And for everyone, every band member. The crux of it is I left. And I left via email, extremely upset. And it's, you know, I'm so glad I didn't talk back then, because it would have been one-sided. I was that upset I wouldn't have seen anyone else's point of view. But really, no one in the band will disagree that at that stage we were all so fragmented and exhausted. And right when things were picking up overseas, you know, everything fell apart, and it was, you know, we had EP plans and something went wrong there, and someone wasn't happy, and I couldn't handle the negative tension in the band anymore. It got that upsetting for me. And I reckon everyone else had some similar pain. They'd have a different point of view, but basically I pulled the pin. I wish I had done it differently. There was quite some pain and tension amongst the band members for a few years to come. But, you know, they're my brothers, so you always come back together. And I love them, you know. I see Roy all the time. I'm in contact with Rod most weeks. He's 2,000 kilometres away, you know, in Brisbane. And Johnny, I've caught up with him a few times and feel really terrible that I haven't. But I mean, that's a two-way street too. But we just don't move in the same circles, and that's why. Whereas me and Roy move in the same circles. Okay, so Roy's in Pod People now, and I'm in Pilots of Baalbek, and we play shows together, and we're part of this geriatric scene, trying to scab shows and keep rocking, you know. So you know, we're all in contact, and we're all friends. And I guess another real issue for me is that I do really love the guys, and I know they love me, and I know that's more important than anything. Because honestly, when it all fell apart and there was all the tension and you know, feel like you weren't friends anymore, then the 30 years wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. It was just heartbreaking. Now it's really worth it, okay? Because we're mates, you know, and all that bitterness has been discussed, and we've got rid of it. But we also, it's 10 years on, and you know, Rod's 2,000 Ks away, and how do you even get that back together and that sort of stuff. But yeah, look, that's how it happened. I pulled the pin. I walked away from all the assets, which I don't know what they did with, but you know, split the money evenly. The bank account was split 25% each. We closed everything down legally, and I just swore I'd never play again because I was so heartbroken. But I started Levitation Hex about 2 weeks later because I still felt an immense drive to express myself in that style. Which is just highly ambitious because I could be in a good band. I believe the Levitation Hex is a good band, but that connection of 30 years rarely happens overnight. And so you're never going to recreate that really. It might have similarities, but I still felt I needed to go in that direction because I felt very stunted by, the last few years and not being able to build on the tours. We had another tour offer to do all the summer European festivals in 2010. Stuff fell through with recording, people not liking stuff. It happens, man. When you think about it realistically, close to 30 years battling as an underground band and juggling day jobs and wives and, cranky employers and getting sick and just living for it and all that, it takes its toll,
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I was, as you were talking about the how much pain and anguish it caused for you, that actual breakup, it's totally understandable. I mean, given what you'd emotionally invested into it, not to mention probably financially, physically, etc., but just that emotional investment when it gets to that point, I think I can only imagine how hard that would have been to deal with.
Oh yeah, and look, and I refused to let anything go right up until the last second. So I think it shocked everyone. But I sort of was really feeling like, how come I'm the only one still in love with this? That's sort of how I felt, And, now with the beauty of hindsight, well, I know the guys were still really in love with it. It was the circumstances that they had to make changes in their lives to cope with. I mean, that's just life, mate. You can't live with the blinders on. I was able to do it because I always had the other guys sort of, you go this way a bit, and without even giving that any sort of consideration whatsoever. They loved it that I had this incredible, ridiculous drive to do it, but they could steer me, and I really needed them there not to go off the rails, and I'm an incredibly difficult person if I didn't get my way. A bit like Vim Fuego. You know what Vim Fuego is? Bad News?
No.
You don't know Bad News, dude. Oh, my God. It's the best heavy metal spoof ever. It comes from your country. So Comic Strip
really?
presents. Comic Strip
shit.
presents.
Okay. I'll have to check that out.
So Rick Mail, Adrian Edmondson, the young ones.
The young ones I know.
Okay. Yeah. So check out Bad News on tour. All right.
Yeah.
So it was actually released 2 months before Spinal Tap. All right.
Oh, really?
Way better.
Yeah.
Like hilarious. So
yeah.
He anyhow, Adrian Edmondson is Vim Fuego in there, and he just, if he doesn't get his way. Yeah.
So
I'm like, geez, I can't believe it. You just gotta see it, mate. You gotta see.
Oh no, I'll add it to the list for sure.
Like, I'm sure you will still find it funny.
Oh yeah, no, there is so much. I mean, the UK is kind of like, I've spoken about this before too, but it's one of these places where the UK of 2022 is such a tragic shadow of its former self. When you think about, there was a time when this country led in almost everything, whether it's comedy, whether it's music, culturally, the country had almost everything sewn up. And then at some point, it's like it became fatigued by itself and decided we're just going to try and copy everything that everyone else does. And it will never have an original thought ever again. Yeah, hopefully.
No, it will, and it won't be in your generation, unfortunately. Like that's it does. I mean, and like here in Australia, because we were so isolated, then all we had was us, and so there was only new ideas all the time. But we're exactly the same. We're exactly the same. I feel like what the hell new and unique is coming out of here at the moment. and I can't hear it. And I'm sure there'll be someone out there who could point me in that direction going, well, listen to this.
But I'd say there's a lot in Australia to like.
Yeah. Oh, look, I mean, it's great. I mean, I even at 58, I mean, I'm going to shows every month, all the time. I enjoy live bands. They don't necessarily have to be metal or extreme in any way. I'd like to see 4 band members connect, and mightn't even like their music, but I like a band's sort of performance, you know, and the way they come together. I'm extremely excited by it, and I can sit and watch pretty much any band. But, you know, obviously most of the shows I go to are rock and roll, metal and punk. So, you know, that's even in the same night, that'll happen. But it's the same, mate. I find, you know, I don't think we can ever say that we were that leading country like the UK was, because I mean, certainly for me, there's very distinct eras of UK music that have been enormous influence on me in my life. Enormous. Mostly with the thrash metal, apart from Sabbath, it was the US, but getting into extreme metal and death metal, it was all the UK, Napalm, Bolt Thrower, Carcass, all the, you know, early Cathedral, all that stuff. Fantastic. Before that, in the 60s, it was, you know, Pink Floyd, Soft Machine, Hawkwind. There's all, you know, yeah, you guys, no doubt, absolute leaders over 5 decades, 6 decades, easy. So no argument from me, mate.
Yeah. So final question. In fact, actually, one other thing I want to touch on. I'll ask you the last question. You always seemed as a vocalist to have, like, and this is what came across on the record. And maybe this is kind of part of what made your vocal so great as well. There seemed to be a real sort of interplay between your voice and Rod's drumming. And I think I read an old review of I can't remember what record it was, but someone was talking about Rod as kind of being the king of fills. And I was thinking to myself, like, I've always thought him to be an incredibly undervalued drummer, because he's got such a,
I agree.
Again, like, you know, there's this sort of primitive groove to the way he plays, and this incredibly expressive way of playing, which I love. But yeah, exactly. You definitely seem to have, more than a lot of other vocalists, there was a real connection between what he was doing and what you were doing with your voice. Is that me reading too much into it? Was that
no, spot on, 100%. And it's not so much the music; it was our partnership.
Yeah,
we were brothers, and we had a goal, and we were going to do it, and we fed off each other in every respect. So half the riffs that you hear didn't even happen until a beat happened, because I love to write riffs to beats. So we get in rehearsal, he'd start doing something, I go, that, yeah, okay, yeah, this, and then it'd happen. Or sometimes it's like, I'm stuck for ideas. Rod, play something. Like, and he'd play something. And I was like, all right, okay. So he was my inspiration a lot of the time. And he wrote a lot of the lyrics. So he would, funny stories. We've got master tapes, well, that's how old we are, and we've got master sessions like in Pro Tools. And then if you mute all the rest of the instruments, you can hear Rod playing drums, but he's also going, and he's mouthing the words, but not quite saying them, you know. So he's really connected to the words and the song as well. And would a lot of the vocal, adds, do that word here. Like, you know, it's a lot of him, mate. It's the most prolific musical partner I've ever had, you know. And I've had a few good ones, but, you know, he's the man. He's the man, and I absolutely agree. Such an underrated drummer. You know, people are always using double kicks and all this sort of stuff. He was so musical and tribal, you know. And it's those Nick Mason from Pink Floyd tom parts that he was just God at, to me, you know. And they were a massive influence on him too, but he metalized it. Very, very solid, really, really strong legs, like great double kicks and tasty, you know. And, you know, his stuff's it's not over the top technical, because that's not what the music calls for. And it's not where we came from, you know. So yeah, look, you hit it right on the head, and the lyrics and the beats are very, very intertwined. And the two guys behind it, which was him and I, and it's a spiritual connection. You know, it's that undescribable thing that happens between human beings. You know, where you're connected and you're doing it, and yeah, he's the greatest. I really wish he was playing drums. Rod, if you're out there, play some drums, mate.
Play some drums. So I was good. So that's probably the best way to wrap it up. If I were to win the Euro Millions or otherwise become independently wealthy, what would it take to get you guys back together again?
Look, you're not the first person to ask that. There's been dollar figures thrown at me, and what it would take is what I said before. The ability to rehearse without breaking the bank, all right? So sort of being in the same city. And all four members with a defined and agreed to plan to do something. And for me, that something would be nothing other than putting on the greatest performance and giving people what they are remembering and what we're remembering, and paying tribute and honor to what a great band we were. If I can't reach that, I don't think I really want to do it. I really, you know, it's all about that, us all agreeing, us all being really into it. And yes, we're going to do a show. For me, that's all it would be. Let's do a show, and let's do it like we never ended. We're that good. All right. I don't want to. The other old guys have reformed, like I said, I've gone and seen their shows, and they're not doing it by halves, mate. They're bloody great. And so I would want to be bloody great, you know, and everyone would have to agree. And you know what? If everyone didn't agree, I perfectly understand, because I have my reservations as well. You know? Yeah.
Well, Adam, I'm so glad we managed to have this conversation. You know, and again, you know, it most likely came out, you know, maybe a little subtly over the course of the conversation. Very big fan. You know, and I'm looking forward to whatever it is that you do next. So, you know, thank you so much. And like I said, you know, I do sincerely hope anyone listening to this who has not delved into the Alchemist back catalog, do yourself a favor and make it your top priority, because you've got so much to discover. And just there's just a wealth of fucking incredible music that you guys put out over the years.
Yeah, and it's all freely available on the interwebs, kids. So
there you go.
Lap it up.
Don't even have to tape trade anymore to get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much, mate. It actually felt really good to talk about it after all these years. And yeah, man, you're special. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. My mom said so as well. Thanks so much, Adam.
Yeah, good on you, mate.
Take care. Bye-bye. grasp at air off the final Alchemist record, Tripsis, which was put out by Relapse in 2007. And when I was talking to Adam about it, again, I was blown away by just how many great bands Relapse had on their roster when they first signed Alchemist. And, that's partly why I started paying attention to them in the first place. This was the era of Mastodon, High on Fire, I believe Neurosis as well, Pig Destroyer, Burnt by the Sun. It really was a case of almost every single thing that label was putting out for a period of time was worth paying attention to, Alchemist notwithstanding. That song, absolutely fantastic. And if you are brand new to the Alchemist experience, I would strongly suggest you start with Organism, which was their fourth record, I believe. Then move on to what's his face, Austral Alien, which came out straight after Organism, and then try Tripsis, and then go back into the earlier stuff. But what a pleasure talking to Adam. What a nice guy, and how nice just being able to have a heartfelt conversation with him about it. I know that probably in the grand scheme of things it doesn't mean an awful lot, but if they were to never get back together again, I do hope that I have at the very least done something to ensure that there's a document in time, or a stitch in time that gives them a proper send-off. But my humblest thanks to Adam for coming on the show. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did recording it. And like I said, make sure that you go check out the Alchemist back catalog if you are not familiar with it. I am going to talk now about some new music. Must be honest, the new Greg Puciato record has been my jam over the last weekend. It came out this past Friday. It's called Mirror Cells. I think Mirror Cells or Mirror Cell. It's absolutely fantastic. It kind of blends the best of everything that he has done that's not Dillinger Escape Plan. There are shades of Soundgarden, shades of Alice in Chains. There's post-punk influences. There's some of kind of a very light smattering of the electronic stuff that he did with the Black Queen, but just a fucking fantastic record. That being said, it's neither Cult nor Grim nor Necro, so I am going to not do an in-depth on it, although I will give my audience credit and say I know most of you guys have a pretty open mind and will probably check it out and like it. But let's talk about some Grim shit. And the new Khold record is out. It's called Svartsyn. It was put out on Soul Cellar Records. Came out about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I have spent a fair bit of time with it since. I've generally speaking been a fan of Khold for most of their career. They started back in 2000, right at the tail end of the black metal second wave. And I think because of the time that they started at, and the fact that their first two records, Masterpiece of Pain, which came out in 2001, and Phantom, which came out in 2002, sounded so much like a tribute to Satyricon, Volcano, and now Diabolical era. I think a lot of people quite unfairly wrote them off, and I think as the years have progressed, I think Phantom in particular has shown its worth, and a lot of people have kind of gone back to it and realized that it's actually a pretty goddamn good record. And they've also been putting out a couple of other good things in the interim as well. I especially liked Krek, which came out in 2005. I liked Hundre Argamel, and I will apologize to anyone from Norway who's listening to this for the absolute raping which I'm giving your native language right now, but I'm not familiar with how to pronounce most of these names. But and it makes it that much harder, the fact that they also don't have, I don't think they do any English songs either. They maybe do a couple here and there, but it's few and far between. So when I start talking about songs in just a second, brace yourself for further mutilation of the Norwegian mother tongue as well. But they then put out Till Enders back in 2014, and then they've kind of disappeared off the face of the map for the last 8 years, only to return now with Svartsyn. And what a return it is. It retains, I think, a lot of what has made this band great, which is, less of an emphasis on speed, more of an emphasis on just really great, catchy black metal grooves that pay homage to the old masters, to the old guard. But managed to sound packaged up in something that sounds at least unique to Khold. It's not unique in the kind of the grand spectrum of music, but, it Khold sound like Khold. if that makes sense. And on this record, like I said, they've done it especially well. It kicks off with Apostle, which is a really kick-ass black and roll groovy song. And then they start to actually throw in a couple of pretty interesting things as the album progresses. I think Ever, which is track 3, has some really cool stuff that they do with melody. Mongard, Dystopy, that are kind of in the middle of the record, are colossal songs with huge grooves, huge riffs. The vocals sound absolutely sick. And then Vilvandre, towards the back end of the record, I think might be one of the best songs that Khold has ever done. As a matter of fact, I think as you go over this album, and I've probably listened to it about 20 or 30 times now, you increasingly sort of take away that this may well have been the best thing that they've ever recorded. And I think now, possibly more than ever, is a great time for them to release it, because there's not a lot of black metal like this coming out. Certainly not black metal that I think sticks true to that quintessential Norwegian sound and pulls it off as well as they do. I mean, there's a lot of fucking extraordinary black metal coming out, which again means that Khold could very easily get lost in the the hullabaloo of everything else that's coming out. And yes, I found a way to use the word hullabaloo in a review, but don't you sleep on it. And that's a phrase I've used a couple of times on this episode. But Svartsyn is definitely worth your time. Like I said, not hugely original, but certainly unique for Khold. And I think in as far as their discography is concerned, it's the best written, best performed, best produced record that they've ever done, as will right now be proven by a track off of the album. This is the one that kicks the album off. It's called Apostle. Apostle by Khold off the album Svartsyn. It's available right now on Soul Seller Records. Make sure you go and check it out. Once again, the link will be in the description to the podcast. If you go on their Bandcamp and you buy yourself anything, make sure they know who sent you. And well done to them. As I said, I've had my eye on this record for a while now. I reacted to a couple of these songs on the News, Rants, and React segment. Liked all of what I heard, and the rest of the album has certainly lived up to expectations. Speaking of the News, Rants, and React segment, brace yourselves, cowards, run for cover. Those easily triggered, time to switch off right now as we head over to Metal Storm. All right, my friends, as usual, we start with Metal Storm and big news right at the very top of our inquest into the latest metal news headlines. Panzerfaust reveal new track as part of their oncoming studio release, Chapter 3, The Astral Drain. Canada's Panzerfaust premiere another new music piece in preview. The Far Bank at the River Styx is now available for streaming at this location. We'll head to that location in a second. And then the article goes on to remind us that the record comes out on July the 22nd through Eisenwald. I have heard the whole album. I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail on my thoughts on it just yet. I'll save that for when the record is released. And probably do the review in about 2 or 3 weeks from now. But, I have mentioned it before, so no spoilers here. It is absolutely fantastic. I think it's as good, if not better, than its two predecessors. It has a very defined place in this quadrilogy that they're busy creating. It has a very meditative feel, but it really kind of showcases these guys' abilities as songwriters, I think, to the best they've ever done. It's fantastic. And no surprise, all of the reviews that have come out so far are overwhelmingly positive. Aside from the odd folk that believes that Panzerfaust attended a MAGA-funded rally in Canada, no less. But anyways, I do know, I'm pretty sure I saw it somewhere, but I can't find it now. Brock Van Dyke posted about the inspiration for the song, and I think it stems back to a near-fatal road accident that the band had back in 2019. But either way, maybe we'll get him back on the podcast at some point to talk about it in more detail. And I'm hoping to be able to meet him in person in August when they play with Uada. But enough from me. Let's give a quick spin to the Far Bank at the River Styx. One of the things that you hear immediately when you listen to this song is the absolutely masterful command that these guys have over melody. And I've said this many times before, there's a lot of bands that deploy melody and they do it in that very basic kind of 3 to 5 chord, almost Iron Maiden kind of way. And what I've said many times, it reminds me a little bit of somebody who whistled a catchy tune and then decided, I'm going to see what this sounds like when I put it through when I play it on my guitar and I put it through a distortion pedal. And I don't like it. I find that sort of thing to be extremely predictable. And there are very, very few bands who have been able to do it without coming across as just bland and ordinary to me. Bands like In Flames immediately come to mind, which is why I've never liked a single thing that they've done. And then there's bands that have a command over melody that is just on a totally different level, and it sounds to me, frankly, like, I don't want to say that you put them right up there with the great composers, but they have a very clear and defined understanding of musical composition. Panzerfaust, I think, right now in the burgeoning black metal scene, I think is one of the very best. There are other bands like that too. Rotting Christ comes to mind. Septic Flesh comes to mind. Melakesh comes to mind. Bands that will take you places that you've never been before, and that take you on a journey with their music. Much like great classical music of yesteryear. Panzerfaust, I think, one of the things they've really nailed down on this record as well, and it's obvious if you pay attention to the first minute and 11 seconds that we've listened to there. They're able to build tension in their songs with very subtle nuances. So, you can hear how the drums become a little bit more urgent, every single time that kind of opening melodic riff is repeated. You hear how the bass starts to, pick up in tempo or just align itself in a slightly different way to the bass drum, as the song kind of picks up. And they do that repeatedly on this album. Building that tension, and then, they kind of give you that just blasting release where everything just comes together, whether it's riffs, speed, the vocals. I've said many times before, I think, Goliath is one of the fucking best vocalists on the face of the earth right now. If I had to do like top 10 vocalists, obviously everybody, no one knows it's Attila number one, number two is Mortus, but I'd be very hard pressed not to have him at in my top 10. He is absolutely incredible. But I'll give this a couple more seconds, and hopefully we can get to a point where the song is in full flow. Those fills that the drummer chucks in there at about the 1 minute 50 mark, it's just so cool, so inventive, so different. It's unlike anything that you've ever heard. And again, that's one of the things I love so much about this band. There's so much originality here. They draw from a very distinct well of influences, and probably a lot of bands that a lot of other others of their ilk draw from as well. But the way that they deploy those influences and the tweaks that they put on the back end of all of it is what makes their music so special. Like I said, I'm not going to go into too much more detail, even though I've spent the last 4 minutes talking about it. But fantastic song, fantastic record. If you like Panzerfaust, this is going to be, one of your albums of the year without a shadow of a doubt. And if you don't like them, I would urge you very strongly to give them another chance, because they're this record is something else. Okay, let's move on to the next headline. Grima releasing new full-length later this month. On July 29th, Grima will put out their fifth long player entitled Frostbitten. A 7-piece atmospheric black metal effort was engineered by Arsen Artemiev Gorsitcha, and I've no doubt butchered his name, mixed by Vladimir Letinin and mastered by Vladimir Letinin. Additional details, as well as the album's first streaming song, can be found below. The song in question is Giant's Eternal Sleep, and let's hear what it's all about. I am not overly familiar with Grima's music, but I really like that. I think the opening again builds up a really nice tension. I like where they've taken the melody. I think the atmosphere is great. I think when the song actually kicks off, it's very cool. The Russian metal scene, I think, is pretty interesting. I remember reviewing a band last year, and some of you will remember me reviewing it on the podcast, L'Autremont, which I think is absolutely superb. I think that a lot of Russian bands right now are probably consciously being overlooked by people because they are mad at Putin, and I could go off on a tangent about that. But I've seen stuff in a non-podcast environment, shall we say, that I just think is absolutely disgraceful. It's like people can't seem to get their head around the fact that even though in their own country, invariably they are against the current administration or the president or the prime minister or whatever the case may be, somehow everybody in Russia, they believe, sides with Putin, which I just think is completely farcical and ludicrous. So I kind of mention that because I'm fairly confident, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm fairly confident that a band like Grima will be overlooked by people because they'll let politics come into the decision making, or they'll let that govern their decision to either give these guys exposure or not. I don't know what their politics are. I don't believe I've ever seen their name on a sketch list. But I didn't want not to go down a rabbit hole there, but it just suddenly occurred to me as I was listening to that song. And when that blast kicks in, it just gets better. Those vocals are maybe a little bit on the screechy side, and I think it'll be interesting to see if you listen to the whole record, whether that is the vocal style from start to finish and they don't change. But, color me interested. I will definitely be giving Frostbitten a listen when it comes out on July 29th. We move on. Inhuman Condition drop new single, Caustic Vomit Reveries, the newest and latest tune from Inhuman Condition's soon-to-be-released record Fearsick, has premiered online in the form of an official video clip filmed by Daniel Wallstrom, Daedra King, and Jeremy Kling. And that's Daedra Kling as well, so I would assume Daedra is Jeremy's significant other. Comments guitarist Taylor Nordberg, we are nearing Fearsick's release, and we couldn't be more excited. Caustic Vomit Reveries is such a barn burner of a song. We thought it would be perfect as the last single before the record comes out. This was one of the newer songs we wrote for Fearsick, and we wanted to make sure we got a solid, simple caveman death metal song on the album. Meat and potatoes and more meat. Bang your head, throw something, and grab the album. Got to say, the bar for caveman death metal has been set awfully high by Werewolves, but let's see what Inhuman Condition has managed to come up with in response.
Apology.
kind of sitting there thinking, I don't know whether I can't make up my mind whether I like this or not. There's something about the groove that's very cool, but there's something that is just a little too, just basic and predictable about that main riff. The na da na na. I mean, how many times have we heard that progression in death metal? And it's not necessarily a bad thing if somebody does that, but it just, again, bar gets raised, and then stuff like this kind of falls by the wayside a little bit because a lot of what else is out is just so much more interesting and so much more, intense, whatever the case may be. But there's something about it that is quite enjoyable too, though. I like the vocals. I believe it's Jeremy Kling that does the vocals, who also plays drums, which is why I think on the clip you're not seeing a drummer. I don't know how they do that live, whether he, drums and vocals, which I've always thought to myself, there's not a lot of people that do that, but I've always thought that looks like the most difficult and horrific thing to have to do for an entire show. And then, yes, one wonders how the Deerside folk will take to Taylor Nordberg's, outside activity. I would I think it's a safe bet Taylor will be in that band for no more than an album. I spoke before about, at some point when you've gone through members at the rate that Deerside have gone, you kind of need to look at or look yourself in the mirror and go, it's not them, it's me. But that being said, who knows how the new Deerside record's going to sound. I think it's supposed to probably be out at some point around next year, early next year, I would guess. But like I said, I'm not going to dwell on it too long. That song is not bad. Is it going to be something that I am giddy with excitement over the day that it comes out? Probably not. But if somebody were to play it, if I'm chilling out at their house, I wouldn't mind it whatsoever. Abaddon Incarnate debut Hyper Chaos track. I think I listened not long ago to an Abaddon Incarnate song, and I didn't like it very much. But let's see if they have managed to vindicate themselves with this latest single. So it says here, to promote their forthcoming studio album, The Wretched Sermon, Irish grindcore band Abaddon Incarnate stream another new music piece in preview, Hyper Chaos. The new outing lands in stores on August 5th, and let's, like I said, let's give it a spin. Considerably better than that first single, and honestly, I've forgotten what that single sounds like. But I do remember just not liking it very much. I mean, it's still not, it's not going to set the world ablaze, but it's pretty enjoyable. No mistaking their influences. You can see on the band photo, if you're watching this on YouTube, the whoever that is on the front, standing there with what looks like a few sprigs of spring onion. He's standing there with his Entombed t-shirt. I mean, that production couldn't be any more Sunlight Studios. But it's reasonably catchy. It's pretty aggressive. I like it. I like the vibe of it. I don't know whether the song itself is like I said, is going to be will have the longevity to feature heavily on my playlist either this year or at any year. But like I said, I like the vibe of it. I think it sounds way better than the first song that I heard by this band. Now that, as the guys from what's the fucking thing called? Lost in Vegas. That, as the Lost in Vegas guy would say, that bit is fire. Around the 2-minute mark, when that groove kicks in and they've got that sort of, single note lead thing that they're throwing in there, I think that sounds really, really cool. Way more of that, please, lads and lady from Abaddon Incarnate. I think they would be exponentially improved by doing a lot more of that. So, the Wretched Sermon coming out August 5th, and as I said, not bad. Definitely way better than when I first heard them. Okay, we move on. Mad Max, new song unveiled. Why on earth would you call your band? I mean, Mad Max is a cool movie, but what a fucking stupid name for a band. And just everything about this seems a little off to me. As part of their upcoming album Wings of Time, out on September 2nd via Roar Records, German rockers Mad Max now unveil the official first single, Too Hot to Handle. I fear the worst. So I like any train wreck, I'm compelled to watch, in this case, compelled to listen.
Driving all night in the pouring rain, wearing a stone face, masking my pain. How could it be? Was too blind to say she was only there when she needed me.
Driving alone in the pouring rain. Blah, blah, trying to mask my pain. She was only there when she needed me. Oh my God. So, beta male metal, I think is what I would call this. Let's write a song that sounds like a Motley Crue ripoff sung by David Hasselhoff about a girl that left me. And let's make sure that the lyrics sound like they were written by a recently rejected 12-year-old boy. I can relate to it to a degree, as I've said before, part jokingly, but probably wholly serious. Back in the day, any sort of romantic rejection that I would experience at school, anything else that frustrated me, it was straight on to Far Beyond Driven and Vulgar Display of Power back to back, and I would listen to songs like Shedding Skin and Live in a Hole, Regular People, and it'd be like, somehow Phil Anselmo is speaking about me on this song. But I'm sure there'll be some computer dweeb that listens to this Mad Max song and feels the same. And if he or she or they get a degree of comfort from it, then good for them. But I personally think that is absolutely terrible. Okay, let's move on. Striper have released a new song. I think I've already wounded your ears enough with one pile of muck. I don't frankly know why Striper gets any any promotion on any kind of metal website whatsoever. I mean, no offense to the guys in the band, but I don't really think they're metal. They just sound abysmal. And yet somehow, especially Blabbermouth, seems to be completely infatuated with them. But then again, I think he's infatuated by anybody who is, conservative, stroke Christian, like almost to a point where it reminds me of when I was young. gobbling up any serial killer book or anything like that I could possibly lay my hands on. Anything that was, about Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer or Charles Manson, I'd be all over that shit. For him, it's like anytime that Ted Nugent opens his mouth, it's like, oh my God, another chapter in the ongoing saga of the battle against the evil far right. Speaking of battles, Bloodbath have released Survival of the Sickest, two released Survival of the Sickest long player. Death Metal Masters Bloodbath announced the release of their next full-length effort dubbed Survival of the Sickest. Due on September 9th via Napalm Records, it's comprised of 9 new tracks. Do not hesitate and check out the first single, Zombie Inferno, with accompanying music video directed by Ash Piers. Bloodbath, of course, the supergroup that features Nick Holmes of Paradise Lost. I believe some of the lads from Catatonia / Diabolical Masquerade. It seems like, after having spent the last 2 records firmly in Camp Satan, they've now moved away and kind of gone back to the gore stuff from earlier records. I've said before, when it comes to gore and horror themed lyrics, I really can, at the age of 42, can take it or leave it. There's some bands that do it really well. Others, I just think, it just feels like they're retreading old ground. And with Zombie Inferno, my expectations were reasonably low when I heard about this at first. That being said, I've always loved everything that Bloodbath have done. In each of their incarnations, I thought the Peter Tatrin era was great. I thought the, Michael from Opeth era was fantastic. I think Resurrection Through Carnage in particular is incredible. And I think that Nick has been a very capable replacement for him. So, on that note, let's hear what they have concocted on Zombie Inferno. Pretty typical Bloodbath stuff. I think I quite like the aesthetic that they've gone for in that music video. Kind of early 70s grindhouse stuff. And the thing is, I can give them a pass probably to a degree with the gore stuff because you understand the spirit in which they're doing it. It's a very much a love letter to stuff that they grew up listening to. And they make no bones about that, and it comes through in their music, but they happen to do it exceedingly well. Is it as interesting to me as some of the stuff, if we let's take a Paradise Lost adjacent comparison, is it as interesting to me as like something like Valenfire or Strigoi? Definitely not. But it's not bad. I like it. I think Nick sounds very good as well. For a guy who's been doing this for as long as he's done, he really still has the chops when it comes to his vocals. And everybody else sounds pretty top-notch as well. By the way, speaking of Grindhouse, I know I say it every single week, but I will just stress once again, make sure that you are on the reg, checking out Necromaniacs, featuring the great Mike Hill of Tombs, and also the Everything Went Black podcast. I think the episodes that he has done over probably the last 20, 30 episodes have been the podcast I look forward to consistently the most every single week. And I don't even watch every single one of the movies or the shows that they talk about. I just find the conversation to be really interesting and really, really entertaining. And a nice escape away from the a lot of the other stuff I listen to, frankly, which is politics or economics, or I've kind of actually moved away from, I guess, more current events or more current affairs, I should say, and I'm back into audiobooks, but it's just a nice way to sort of reset and chill out. As I said, I think the dynamic that Mike has with Mike Scandato, who's a phenomenal co-host, as well as Jeff. I can't remember Jeff's surname off the top of my head. Also great. I think is awesome. So I can't give you a better endorsement or a stronger endorsement than that. But for sure, I would say check it out. As a side note about Bloodbath, I see now that they're signed to Napalm Records. I actually do have a bit more of an in with the gentlemen from Napalm Records that run PR over here in the UK. So hopefully I'll be able to get somebody from that band on. And speaking of a band that I will definitely be getting somebody on the show at some point down the line, Gaerea have just released their first single, and I know that Katie was super, super excited about about this coming out. Big deal, obviously, with the music video. I think there's a lot that's gone into, putting together this record, and I think the weight of expectation on this band has been pretty significant as well. Particularly after their previous record, which, if memory serves me correctly, was number 10 on my top 20 of 2020. I may be corrected on that down the line, but it says, after yesterday's new album announcement, cathartic black metal outfit Gaerea today premiere the first official single video, Salve. The Mirage full-length comes out on September 23rd, 2022. Gaerea on the new single. Today we finally unleash Salve upon you all, the first glimpse of music which will take part of our new album, Mirage. Salve is an excruciating voyage into the vortex's abyss, a burning carriage which will lead us all to the golden walls of mental catharsis and endless suffocating whispers trapped within our bleeding corpses. The journey between reality and perception is about to begin. Join us. That is the sound of a band where all cylinders are firing in big style. Fantastic. I think that sounds fucking fantastic. Vocalist sounds great. Guitarists sound superb. The drummer is absolutely on fire. The music video is so good looking. It has a very distinct style, very distinct aesthetic and look. I've always liked what these guys do on stage anyway with the masks. It's not completely original, but it's something a little bit different. But this is very good. Very, very, very good. And once again, yet another record added to a growing pile of releases that, I think has made 2022 one of the best years I can ever remember. And I say that almost every single year, and this is the thing about the scene, why I get so fucking annoyed when a, vegan, low testosterone dork like Thomas Fisher goes on about how the spirit is out of the scene. I mean, the only spirit that's out of the scene is the fact that this guy hasn't saved enough of his royalty checks to be able to afford an internet connection and a Spotify account. That is fantastic stuff. Fantastic. And like I said, I'm definitely going to try and get one of these guys on the podcast, because the cryptic way in which they've announced this alone, I think will make for interesting conversation. But I like it very much. And actually, by the way, speaking of top 20s, whatever the case may be, I am very seriously now considering doing either a top 30 this year or maybe even a top 40. I feel like if Decibel magazine can get away with that, then so can I, number one. But number two, there's just so many fucking good stuff, and you know, it always feels like a shame to leave out a couple of bands, you know, at the end of the year. As I said, especially because there's so many great things that come out. So I don't think it'll dilute the I mean, what some have called the greatest honor in all of music, you know, beside obviously being featured in the Into the Necrosphere Demo of the Week segment, which I really ought to kick off properly again. Obviously, I know I had Cult Burial on this episode, but I should make it a weekly thing again. That aside, I think doing a top 30 or a top 40, I think will be fun. And I'm going to for sure reach out to Mike and see if he'll do the top 10 again with me. I want to try and make that an annual institution. And then we'll see who else wants to get in on the action. My man Razor Eater Metal on Instagram. I think he could be one of the dudes. And then we'll see who else is up for it. But that Gaerea record, if the rest of the album sounds like it, would not be surprised if it makes that list. Great stuff. Very, very, very cool. I think if I didn't stop myself, I would probably ended up just listening to the whole song. But yeah, I like that very, very much. Okay, let's give one more song a spin, and then we'll move on to the Democrats' Guide to Rock Music. Vimur post new video. Georgia-based black metal formation Vimur are unveiling a David Parham filmed new official video for Transcendental Violence, a track that appears on the band's recently released same-titled album. I like the name Transcendental Violence. And let's hear if the song lives up to its moniker. Black metal for the from the filthier side of things. That's also fucking brilliant. I really, really like that. Didn't know Vimur before. I've just actually added them on my ongoing Cobuzz 2022 playlist that I keep so that I don't forget about anything that's been released. But I really like that. Very, very cool like, you know, as far as like violence is concerned, there's plenty of that in the song. You know, I like that production. It's a little crusty, a little filthy. You know, vocals sound totally unhinged. I think they are a band I will definitely have to do a lot of investigation into, because that's really, really cool stuff. Now, I can imagine if you live in a state where Stacey Abrams once ran for governor, you are going to be pissed off, and those guys certainly do sound pissed off. Speaking of Stacey Abrams, let's move on to the Democrats' Guide to Rock Music, Blabbermouth. The first headline is a July 2022 video tour of the graves of Pantera legends Dimebag and Vinnie Paul. I'm not particularly interested in seeing that. I've never understood the fascination with people that visit the grave sites of famous people. You didn't know them personally, and even, I mean, quite honestly, when I kick the bucket, do I want people visiting my grave site? No, I don't. I mean, I frankly don't want a grave site. I would like to have my body taken and tossed into the fucking ocean. I think the whole funeral industry is one of the biggest scams and one of the biggest rip-offs as far as money is concerned. This side of the wedding industry. So yeah, I mean, I suppose I get if people want to go and pay their respects, but it's not something I would want to do, and I'd certainly have no interest in seeing a video about it. Born again Christian Jonathan Cain. We had our freedoms diminished during lockdown. I agree with that. Undoubtedly, I would assume that Borry does not agree with it. But I'm not going to go into detail about that, because next week, myself and Cheyenne get into a lot of very spicy conversation, including some of the stuff around the lockdown and vaccines and whatnot. So beware. You'll be hearing quite a lot of that on next week's podcast for those that are sensitive. Travis Barker says he is feeling much better after being hospitalized for life-threatening pancreatitis, which is a motherfucker and can kill you. So hopefully he's feeling better. I hate Blink-182. Don't really even like Travis Barker very much, but it's a fucking shit disease. Robert Trujillo's son contributed additional guitar tracks to a version of Metallica's Master of Puppets in Stranger Things. Not interested really in talking about that, but I do want to pick back up on the conversation I was having with Adam about singers and like how they sound nowadays. I went back and I listened to a bunch of Metallica songs on YouTube, because they've been posting like a live track of, I think, more or less every date that they've been on their current tour. And I've got to say, James sounds pretty damn good. I'm sure we'll get to it in a second anyway, although I probably wouldn't listen to any of the songs, because most likely the video will get blocked. But I've heard him do Ride the Lightning, Metal Militia, I think they did recently. A couple of the old tunes, and he sounds pretty damn great. Considering how many others of his ilk sound like trash, and their voices are way past it. And frankly, it kind of brought a warm feeling to my heart, knowing how public and open he's been about some of these stresses around getting old, and whether or not he can still hack it, and whether or not he can still perform at the right level. The only thing that I would say, you listen to him do something like Metal Militia, and he still does all the high-pitched stuff with his voice, which I think at this stage of the game, frankly, if I were him, wouldn't bother putting myself through it. I would just change the vocal line. I think with a lot of those older songs, you could quite easily change the vocal line, and maybe there'll be one or two people that complain, but I mean, they can shut the fuck up. But if I were him, I would just tailor those vocal segments or sections that are really difficult to pull off. I would just tailor that to how his voice sounds nowadays. But yeah, I think he sounds very cool. And like I said, I have spoken about this before, I think on last week, but Jazz Coleman was one name that I'd forgotten when I listed off the people that are still sounding top-notch. I mean, that guy is on a fucking different level. And I will also tell you who sounds great. I spoke about it when I did the Khold review. Greg Puciato. I don't know what sick Philistine savage scumbag gave that record 7 out of 10. It should get 70 out of 10. It's fantastic. Brilliant. Maybe I expected nothing. Maybe it caught me at the right time. But it is fucking excellent. And I mean, I've always liked Greg's voice anyway. But that record in particular, he has nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. Okay. Nile parts ways with bassist vocalist Brad Paris. That did not last long. South Carolina's Egyptian-themed death metal titans Nile have announced the departure of bassist vocalist Brad Paris. On Friday, July 1st, Nile released the following statement via social media. It's time for us to share with our fans and the metal community that Brad Paris is leaving Nile this year. This is something we've known about and have been working together with Brad through the transition. Brad has been an exemplary member of Nile since 2015, conducting himself at all times with professionalism and integrity. He's parting under the absolute best of terms to focus on other projects and family concerns. Our friendship and brotherhood remain as strong as ever, and we wish him only the best as he continues his musical journey in life. Nile's touring and recording commitments remain in effect. It's natural for a band that's been going strong for 25 plus years to have changes, and we promise to our fans to stay as true and brutal as ever. At this time, we have a few strong candidates for bass vocals. However, any persons interested in auditioning should email nilebassistaudition@gmail.com. I'll tell you what they should do. In part because Morbid Angel aren't exactly hugely active on the touring circuit. Get Steve Tucker. I think that would be a fucking absolutely fantastic match. He's got the look on stage to suit that band really well. His voice would suit the band really, really well. He's a great bass player. I think that would be, as much of a not a shock, but kind of as much of a sort of obvious win as Eric Rutan joining Cannibal Corpse was. And the thing is, you understand why somebody like Brad would go. I'm surprised we don't see more of it, quite frankly. I think a lot of folks. I remember talking to Jeremy Wagner about this, and he was saying that when I think during COVID, you kind of realize that being with your family is so much more important than being out on the road, especially at this stage of life, that you can't really see your way clear to start doing that again. And if you're part of a band that are like Nile or a bunch of road dogs, and you've got a family, I just totally understand why that person would turn around and go, this is not for me. I maybe will do a few weekend shows, but to be away from my loved ones for 3 months out of at a time, it's just not something I'm down with. But like I said, Steve Tucker, that's who I would say if I had my wish, that's who they would get to replace Brad. Looking forward to them doing their next album as well. I thought their last record was absolutely fantastic. Really well recorded, really well played. Songwriting was some of the strongest songwriting they've done since Those Whom Gods Detest. But I mean, they're always a rock solid band anyway. Okay. Watch Guns N' Roses joined by Carrie Underwood at London concert. I like me some Guns N' Roses, but I don't like when they've got someone like Carrie Underwood as part of the band. That was always one of the. I think I might have actually even said it in the Matt Wilcock interview. When they had the Soweto Gospel Choir, the backstage singers. Oh, sorry, it's the backing singers on songs like "Pretty Tied Up." It just leaves those songs very toothless. I mean, I think she's on there for nonsense like "Sweet Child of Mine," which I've never liked anyway, but still. Bad Wolves unveil new song "The Body" from upcoming EP. I've spoken before about the Facebook page that I used to run. Aside from the many times that I posted exposés on Slipknot and Marilyn Manson, I once did a headline that said "Bad Wolves equal bad news," and the mass of imbeciles that follow that band went absolutely apoplectic. Much like the massive imbeciles going apoplectic when I said that Andy Beersack, I think I called him Andy Beerbag or something like that, or Andy Ballsack, They just could not stand it. Here's that headline I was referring to earlier: pro shot video of Metallica performing Metal Militia at Pink Pop Festival. I'll say this about James as well. He looks like he is starting to get a little swole. I don't know if he's on that TRT or if he started taking Tonkat Ali. But he looks to be physically in great shape. And again, I no matter what my thoughts are on Hardwired to Self-Destruct and Death Magnetic, and I mean, God forbid, Saint Anger, one of the worst fucking records ever made by a band. I think because I grew up with Metallica, I will always have always be rooting for them. I always hope that things turn out well for them. And I'm glad if James is in a good place. As I said, physically he looks great. Speaking of physical greatness, I have, after my conversation with Cheyenne, which you will hear next week, I got back onto the old intermittent fasting. I am on actually day 1 of it right now, and how many more hours do I have left to go? I think not long actually, and I feel pretty good. And the good news about that is, at least as far as I understand about intermittent fasting, is if you can go through a 16-hour fast with a reasonable degree of comfort and you're not being overcome by hunger pangs, it means that you are not majorly in the danger zone as far as insulin resistance is concerned, which has always been my fear. I've been very open about this. My dad had diabetes, or has diabetes. I am absolutely fucking terrified about it, about getting it myself. Especially because I'm not like obese, but I'm definitely carrying some extra padding that I could do without. So we'll see what the old intermittent fasting does in combination with all of the other stuff that I've done. I will definitely say also one of the benefits of intermittent fasting, which I've heard a lot of people talk about, is that it helps solve issues with inflammation that you might have in your joints and things like that. And I have really been feeling it this last week, and I kind of thought maybe it's down to just being tired from this new workout protocol that I'm following. But this morning I've woken up, joints feel great. Muscle ache is way less than it's been for a while. So I mean, it clearly has benefits. So if you don't do intermittent fasting, I would suggest it's worth giving it a try and seeing if it works for you. And I'm using an app at the moment called Zero, which helps you time everything and helps you set goals and stuff like that. And that seems pretty cool too. All right, Black Sabbath's heavy metal bench used by global debt and climate protesters. So global debt and climate protesters this week decided to use the famous Black Sabbath heavy metal bench in Birmingham, England, to highlight their campaign. The activists placed placards around the necks of the metallic images of Geezer Butler and Bill Ward, with the latter reading, "G7 turn debt into climate action." I think this is some sort of initiative to get third world debt forgiven. And I say vain hope because I grew up in the third world and I know very much how the third world operates. I think more so than a lot of the do-gooders in the first world West. But there's this idea that if third world debt is forgiven, then the countries under whom the yoke falls hardest will somehow start using that money to protect the climate. And I can tell you right now, that is a pipe dream concocted by absolute fools who not only don't know how Africa and the rest of the third world operates, but they also don't know what debt is, and I frankly think they don't know anything about how money works either, because they don't seem to understand that the money has to come from somewhere. So you get into the conversation with these same beatniks about something like forgiving student debt, for example. On one hand, they're complaining about inflation. On the other hand, they don't realize that if you suddenly write off, $2 trillion or $3 trillion worth of student debt, that money has to still come from somewhere. So all it'll end up meaning is the government prints more money, and if the government prints more money, inflation goes up, even worse. So I don't even want to engage with fucking stupid thinking like that, because it drives me nuts that people in the in 2022 are so completely illiterate about how finance works and how the economy actually works that they actually think that these ideas are great because it makes them feel great. Anyway, let's finish up for the week. I said last week I'm going to start a new tradition, and that is to bring you some of the most insane headlines that I have been able to find over the course of the last week. And I've got a couple of gems here for you. The first one comes off of the New York Post. Man with whistling scrotum escapes death after bizarre medical emergency. The next one, runaway royal Meghan demands reprisal for Roe v. Wade, ruling that upset runaway royal Meghan demands reprisal for Roe v. Wade ruling that upset her feminist husband, Prince Harry. Tell me you have the testosterone of a 12-year-old girl without telling me you have the testosterone of a 12-year-old girl. This one, unsurprising. Top Gun Maverick is the right's latest culture war crusade. Another one about Top Gun. Top Gun Maverick does not deny toxic masculinity, and that's not okay. Next, Amazon blocks searches for LGBTQ plus products in the United Arab Emirates amid regional anti-homosexuality push. This from the same company who would no doubt fire you if you dared say anything remotely negative about Pride in the United States or the United Kingdom, and whose employees in the States are now demanding that Amazon no longer do business in states where abortion is legal. And then finally, very sad, it's not really funny, it's a fucking disgrace, quite frankly, but I thought I should mention it because it's not the first time that this has happened. And on next week's episode, I go pretty hard in the paint on these folks. But New York Post article from July 1st, vegan mom starved toddler to death with diet of raw vegetables and fruit. I would hope that they load up that woman into a helicopter and they toss her into the fucking darkest recesses of the Congo and leave her to the cannibals. Because if you're that irresponsible, honestly, you deserve everything that's coming to you. And I've no issue with people being vegan. If that's your lifestyle choice, if you've decided that's what makes you feel great, fine. But don't try and push this nonsense anymore that it's a healthy diet, because it's absolutely medically proven not to be. I don't give a fuck what garbage statistics and data you want to throw up. Anyone who's anyone will be able to disprove it. You literally can read, you can Google a couple of articles about nutrient deficiency when it comes to the vegan diet, and it'll instantly rubbish anything that anyone has to say to you about how terrible meat is and fish is bad and eggs are bad, etc., etc. So anyway, like I said, hard in the paint on that next week. But it brings me to a solid hour of News Rant. I hope you guys have enjoyed that. And let us now usher ourselves towards the final the final song of this podcast. That final track could not have been anything other than another Adam Agius project, Levitation Hex, off the album Cohesion. The song is Energy Refund, and I think I actually played it a couple of months ago, but a great record. It came out on High Roller, I think back in 2016 or 2018, but do not sleep on it, much like the rest of the Alchemist discography. And I do hope that I have managed to sway a couple of you guys towards checking out their stuff, because if you don't know it, you really do have an absolute treasure trove of gems to look forward to. It is a band that does so many different things and does it so exceptionally well. And I was just completely and utterly stoked to have Adam on the podcast. Next week, remember, Cheyenne is going to be back. I think his third appearance on the show. That was a super fun conversation, very spicy and very open and honest, as our chats always are. It's one of those where if you've are already friends with somebody, you don't have to go through the formalities of kind of getting the person to relax and buy into the idea of long form conversation on the show. You know, you just hit record and you start talking, which is exactly what we did. So that's a good one, and I will keep you guys posted on other guests that I have in the pipeline. For now, though, I hope all of you guys stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see all of you bad motherfuckers again next week.